Hello, hello. Happy Wednesday evening. Allie Peak, Will Thomas hanging out with you tonight. I was just telling Will before I came on air, I have my caffeine, I have my water. Let's do this. I am ready. Will Thomas, of course, of Tailgate Talk SEC, but I think we just need to add a peek inside the SEC and a peek inside the Florida Gators there because that is where you spend a lot of time these days with us as well. But how are you today?
I'm doing good. We finally have some decent fall weather here in Nashville, so I'm no longer sweating every time I walk outside. It was nice today.
Oh, I'll pretend I'm you. I'm here in sunny Florida, and that is absolutely not the case. Although I hear there might be a cold front this weekend. We might get down into the 60s before 9 a.m., and then we'll be back in the 80s. But I'm here for it. My little fall, little taste of fall. Okay, so we have talked on a peek inside the SEC. We really haven't talked on a peek inside Gator football about the upset win last weekend. Florida did obviously beat Texas. You were there. I was there. It was pretty dominant from start to finish, except for maybe the last 3 minutes where we felt like there was a chance we were going to give it away there right at the end. But we didn't. Florida won. It was, a whole team, a complete game, I think, from all three
Mhm.
facets, which is not something that we've seen a ton of. For sure not this season, but truly in the Billy Napier era. It might be my favorite win from the Napier era, which I feel like is kind of saying something. But now we have another test. Texas A&M, really good team. What are your thoughts on them overall?
I think, at least for me, they've probably crossed that bridge where I can no longer make the 8-4 jokes because I do believe that this year they're a level above that.
Okay.
Because I mean, the A&M teams of the past, right? Those teams would not have gone to South Bend and won that game. And
Yeah.
more importantly, what I've seen is that they're able to win the game in a variety of ways. Like Notre Dame, they won 41-40, then they beat Auburn 16-10. Like they're able to do both the shootout and also the slugfest. So
Yeah.
being able to win games like that where the other team can't necessarily dictate the tempo to your disadvantage, that's really impressive to me. So because of that, I kind of think A&M, I'm not going to say over the hump yet because you got to see it to believe it first, but I
Yeah.
do think that they're definitely a notch above where they've been the past 5 or so years.
Last year in the swamp, we got to see some of Marcel Reed. And I can remember sitting there thinking, is this going to be their next Johnny Manziel? And I wouldn't say that it played out like that the rest of the season. He kind of had his best game against Florida. Um, but he has he's been serviceable for Texas A&M this year. He's been borderline good at times. He is a dual threat quarterback, something that Florida has struggled with in the past. What are your thoughts on how they kind of handle him?
Yeah, so I mean, just starting off, like he's an unbelievable athlete. He really is, but he struggles a lot throwing the ball consistently. He has a 59.7% completion rate this year. He can absolutely launch the ball. You just don't really know where it's going most of the time. So
Yeah.
I mean, he's still a young player, right? Like he's still a sophomore. So there's plenty of time for him to develop overall. But in terms of this Saturday, like the Gators, they're going to be looking at that and saying, like, okay, we can probably, if we put some pressure on him, we can maybe pick some balls off, really make him throw some errant balls. So for right now, Reed is still very much in the developmental phase of his career, but his athleticism and ability to improvise definitely cannot be overlooked at all.
Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion are incredibly dynamic, and the Aggies rely on a ton of those explosive plays. Do you think UF is going to be able to limit those?
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup with this. So Florida's pass defense has a very good success rate, but bad explosives. So
Right.
you're not going to beat Florida's secondary that often, but when you do, like it's going to be worth it. And it's the same story for A&M's offense, where they have a bad success rate, but they have great explosives. So you kind of have like all it takes in this game really for A&M would be like two deep shots to really swing that home crowd and get a lot of momentum. And it feels like that's how it profiles. Like I'm not worried at all about Florida getting carved up consistently downfield, but when it happens, I'm afraid it's going to really sting. Like 75-yard touchdown or like a 3rd and 15 absolute nuke to really shift momentum. So it feels like that could be one of those things. But I think to stop it, it really comes down to pressuring Reed because with how willing of a runner he is, if you get him moving, the odds that he takes off are decently high, right? His eyes will come down from a guy deep downfield, and he'll just look to run. And if you get him sped up, get him off balance, I think Miles Graham is going to be huge in this game for Florida because we saw his sideline to sideline speed a good bit against Texas. He needs to show that again this weekend to really get Marcel Reed down before he's able to make a move and get out into open space.
So, we talk about those explosive plays, and if they just need to get Texas A&M just needs to get a couple of them to kind of, be able to take control of this game. So I rewatched the Texas game. Like I said earlier, you and I were both in the stands. Sometimes it's hard to see everything that is going on where the play is not. And, there were some interesting things that I noticed. And one of those is that Florida's secondary is lucky that Arch Manning was terrible.
Yeah.
There was opportunities to burn Florida on explosives in that game that didn't get taken advantage of. Seeing what we saw Saturday, is that something that you think, these DBs really need to be aware of? Because yes, this defense played well, but part of that secondary, I don't even know if looking good's the right word, but looking good was the fact that Arch was pretty off the mark most of the night.
I mean, definitely is, because even though Reed isn't necessarily the most accurate deep ball guy, he'll still throw the ball down there. And all it takes, like I said, is just one or two good balls to really, you can put up 14 points like that. So it's definitely a concern. I mean, Texas has great athletes at receiver, right? So it's not necessarily surprising that they're able to get some space. I was probably a little worried with how often I would look to my right and all of a sudden I just see Ryan Wingo like with nobody on him. So it
Right.
was definitely a little concerning seeing how that played out. Like you said, luckily for Florida, Arch couldn't hit him because of whether he missed the throw, just he was pressured. But I mean, kind of like what I said about just before, Florida's defensive front, they need to disrupt Reed because he's not the greatest accurate passer downfield as is. If you get him on the move, that'll go down even more.
So one of the things Florida's defense does do incredibly well is, stop the run. But Texas A&M runs the ball very effectively. Do you think UF can continue to limit them on the ground like they've done pretty much everybody else? I mean, outside of really Miami towards the end of that game, like Florida has done a very good job against the run.
They have, yeah, and the numbers say they can do it again this weekend. So the Gators are great defensively in line yards per rush allowed, second level yards per rush, success rate, and rush explosives. Now A&M, they have a great success rate running the ball, but they're not explosive. They haven't necessarily had to be. They've been able to just lean on people and get like 3.5 yards per carry, like we saw them do against Mississippi State. In A&M's last two games, they ran for 303 on Mississippi State and 207 on Auburn on the ground. Now those two defenses are not Florida's defense. But A&M has still shown a willingness to commit to running the ball, even if they're not getting, big pops, and just like, we're going to take 3-4 yards per carry and just beat you to death. So we'll see if Florida is able to kind of get A&M off of that wave, if they're able to smother them a little bit more. But this is a pretty good matchup. I do think it's strength on strength, seeing Florida's rush defense versus the Aggies rushing attack.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Texas A&M's defense. I feel like each and every week we're playing the toughest defense we're going to see this season. And then we go into the next game and we have seen LSU, Miami, and Texas, all teams with really formidable defenses. How does Texas A&M stack up?
Yeah, so they have great success rates on both standard and passing downs, but you can get them with explosives, like we've seen with Florida's defense, really. They're allowing 4.5 points per opportunity as well, which is not a good number defensively. So Florida, when they get across that 50, we'll be looking for them to get more touchdowns than field goals, and I think this is a matchup where they can do it. I'm wondering if A&M's numbers and metrics are a little skewed by their early games, because they gave a 24 to UTSA, 22 to Utah State, and 40 versus Notre Dame. Then they hit their bye week, and they've given up 19 total points over their last two games to Auburn and Mississippi State. So you had 3 games with that bad defense, get a week off, and now they've really come out of that bye week looking a lot sharper. But there is still tape out there, obviously, of offenses having success against this defense. And Florida probably has the highest caliber of athlete all around than A&M has seen this year. Like, Notre Dame is good, but I'm not sure they have the same weapons out wide. So I do think the Gators have the weapons to get through A&M's defense and really get them uncomfortable. But it is worth noting that the Aggies have looked way better their past 2 games than they did their first 3 on that side of the ball.
Mike Elko and Billy Napier talk during the bye week and figure out how to get their teams back on track here. Mike Elko did say this week, and part of it's rat poison, right? We don't want the team to listen to it, but Elko did say that this is probably the most talented team that they have faced this season, and maybe will face this season. Didn't say the best coached or the best on the field or whatever, but he did say most talented. One of the things that UF did incredibly well against Texas, and I know you and I were both relieved, was that they ran the ball really well. And part of that was being patient and allowing these things to develop as opposed to getting away from it. Jaden Baugh took, obviously, the bulk of the carries. We did see Clark a little bit. He is now injured. I haven't seen tonight's injury report to see if who's off it, who's on it. But as of yesterday, they didn't think they were going to have Webb. They didn't think they were going to have Jackson. They didn't think they were going to have Clark. So essentially, is it Katie Daniels' time? We know that Coach Napier is never going to go with just one running back. That's not his style. But can Florida replicate the success that they found on the ground against Texas? And if they do, who's the Robin to Jaden Baugh's Batman?
I will say just as of 58 seconds ago, Duke Clark is listed as out. So the Gators will not have him this weekend. But I do think the run game overall should be okay. I am curious to see who that true running back number 2 is because, like you said, with Napier cycling backs, I think we could see just about anybody who still has both their legs attached to their bodies. Because A&M's defensive front is definitely not better than Texas's. So I do think it's a slightly easier matchup for Florida running the ball and for their blockers. I also really like this idea of getting Vernell Brown involved in some out wide runs. We saw it on a third down early in that game against Texas. Getting the ball to your 5-star players does actually help you get more first downs. So hopefully we see Napier do a little bit more of that in this game and keep getting him going. I'm really excited to see Jaden Baugh versus Torian York. That little matchup. That is must-see TV. York is the Aggies' leading linebacker. He is a total heat-seeking missile and is so violent and aggressive. He's probably one of the best defenders in the conference. So seeing those two just kind of go at it, whether it be between the tackles or out wide, is going to be really interesting and probably really decide how well Florida can run the ball, excuse me. And if their run game is as good as it was last week, we'll see that open up the downfield passing game where you can get the ball down to Dallas. You can maybe get Trey Wilson a little more involved. So, it's the ABCs, but if Florida can run the ball better, that will really open up that entire offense. And I think it comes down to Jaden Baugh versus Torian York, and can Napier keep getting a little creative with how he wants to scheme up runs to different guys.
Creative, not one of the staff's generally favorite words, but okay. Let's talk for a minute about the trenches. Let's start with Texas A&M's offensive line against UF's banged up defensive line, who got it done against Texas last week, though. Looks like Will might be frozen. You okay,
Yeah,
Will?
so the Aggies offensive line, it's really...
Go ahead.
Did I freeze up?
You froze up, but you're good now.
I'm good now?
Yep, you're good.
There we go. Fantastic. I'm sorry. The Aggies offensive line it's been one of the best in the country per PFSN, which is an analytics page. They are averaging 3.08 seconds to throw for Marcel Reed, 23.5% pressure rate on non-blitzes, and they're getting 1.4 yards before contact of push on carries. Like, this offensive line has really been absolutely dominant. And in the context of Florida, this is a major step up from Texas's offensive line. So we're going to try and counteract that. Gators need Tyreek Sapp and Jaden Woods to really be forces on the edge, because that will force double teams and allow your big bodies in the middle to really take up space effectively and try and swallow up those running backs with just arm tackles or just slow them down until somebody else can be there to help. So this offensive line for A&M is probably one of it not quite as good as Miami's, but it is one of the best in the country to this point. So it'll be a big step up in competition for Florida from last week, but it's nothing that they haven't seen before.
Okay, let's go to the other side of the ball. Texas A&M's defensive line against a UF offensive line that put it together last week.
Yeah, so Florida has to watch out for Cassius Howell. He has 7 sacks on the year, far and away the team leader for the Aggies. But this really is the chance, though, for the Gators offensive line to prove that they have turned a corner, right? And like last week wasn't just back against the wall at home, we played a good game. Because as a whole unit, Texas is better than A&M's, that defensive line, I do think, and they handle them very well. Cassius Howell is probably better than anyone on Texas has at this point, but pound per pound, the whole unit, I do think that Longhorns over the Aggies. So Florida should be able to handle this competition-wise. Now, what I am kind of worried about is being on the road, because you're used to having false starts. See, all the good blocking you did on first and second down, a holding on third down undoes all of that. So I'm a little worried about the change of scenery for this offensive line, because when you have 100,000 people yelling at you, it's pretty easy to flinch once or twice. So my biggest concern really isn't even necessarily the personnel, as long as they're able to contain Howell, but it's really the atmosphere, and can they avoid false starts and silly penalties that can kill drives.
I think I'm the only person on the planet that believes this, but I have been to Kyle Field and was unimpressed with the noise factor. It was Johnny Manziel. You've never been there? It's a really cool stadium, and they're incredibly cult-like. It was Johnny Manziel's first game. It was Texas A&M's first game in the SEC. This was when my brother played, and they used to allow fans to exit the stadium through the field. So you would literally walk down the stairs, they would open the door and you would go on the field. And I literally looked at my dad and was like, they're going to play LSU here one time and this is never going to happen again. And that's exactly what happened, is that LSU played there. Didn't go well when those Cajuns came onto the field, and that, that tradition was done away with. But I hear what you're saying. And, we saw what noise can do to an offensive line last week. And honestly, Florida's offensive line had false starts last week and they weren't affected by the home crowd. So that is definitely a concern. What do you think UF fans should be most concerned about with this Texas A&M team?
I think it's really Marcel Reed's ability to kind of score and create big plays, out of nowhere. Because you can get this team into a 3rd and 13, get pressure and flush them out. But then with this track record, boom, 45-yard pass to Craver or 20-yard scramble that can just totally derail your defensive confidence on that drive. Because plays like that are just so detrimental, especially on the road when you don't have 95,000 fans behind you. It's the other way around. So they need to limit those explosives, obviously, but especially in certain situations where you've played a great first 2 downs of defense and then you just let one leak get through and all of a sudden A&M's scored. So they need to be able to limit those explosives to really keep their momentum on their side and make sure the crowd can kind of get out of it.
Okay, so conversely, what should Texas A&M folks who might be watching this be most concerned about this UF team?
For the second week in a row, Florida being willing to stick with the running game, because Jaden Ball will produce. Like, we know that he's going to have a good game if you give him enough carries. And if they throw in some more wrinkles with Vernell Brown, maybe with Trey Wilson, the run game will be even stronger, and that will open up downfield shots to make it easier for Lagway. We saw them set up with the running game, and you got a one-on-one shot to Vernell Brown down the middle of the field last week. Like, that it works. That's how offense works. So if Florida's able to do that consistently and they actually commit to running the ball instead of doing what they have been doing for the first 4 games, that game script, I do think, favors Florida because of how talented their offense is.
So we talked a little bit about Kyle Field and the stadium there and how that could affect the offensive line, but we'll talk bigger picture about UF playing on the road this week versus at home this past week. How much do you think that the swamp had to do with them finding some success? And Napier hasn't been good on the road the last 4 years. Is this something that you think they can change?
I hope so. But I mean, in terms of last week, I do believe that the crowd was a massive boost to beating Texas last week, because in the second half, I forget exactly when it was, but Texas was driving. They were in plus territory. Then it was false start, 2nd and 19, passing down, Arch throws a pick. Like, the crowd directly caused that drive to stall and forced Texas to do something they were not comfortable doing. And that pick really turned the whole game. And just overall, I am a pretty big believer in buildings and environments and how home atmospheres can really sway games in major ways. So Florida, like I said, with their offensive line watching the false starts and the penalties, if they back up and Florida's behind the sticks, that has looked horrible all season for the Gators. When they haven't been able to set their own tone, when the defense has been having their way with their unit, that has screwed this offense over countless times already. So I am concerned about going from home to on the road in an environment that has 100,000 people. How will they react? Because if it's poor, we're going to know pretty early that Florida has a really big task ahead of them.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about Sleeper in a minute. Unfortunately, there are no more or less predictions to be made this week, but I'll get to that in a second. Before I do, tell me your prediction for this game.
Last week really did give me a little bit of confidence in Florida, right? Because we saw that we thought we all had one more data point, because I am worried about the hostile environment. I'm worried about being able to replicate that offensive performance on the road. I think A&M wins a close one. I do like Florida against that number at 7.5. I think they cover. I think they compete, but I'm not quite ready yet to say that Florida can go on the road and win a game against an A&M team that's good.
All right. So do you have a number for me?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask that. I'll say 31-24, something like that. I do think Florida's offense does enough, but I think A&M will just kind of lean on Florida a good bit. They'll get theirs. A little higher scoring than most people think, but I just think both offenses are talented enough to get it done.
All right. Well, we appreciate you. Tell everybody where they can follow you on social media and listen to your work.
Yeah, I'm on W Top Sports on Twitter and Tailgate Talk SEC, just about everywhere else.
All right. Well, we appreciate you. We will see you same time, same place next week.
Thanks, Allie.
All right, guys. And I do want to say thank you to Sleeper for their support. Use code PEAK, that's PEEK, for a 100% match